Hello, welcome to Tales on my Welsh riverbank here in Pan's Grotto. We were hoping to get this story recorded for you for Christmas, but I'm afraid the weather was against us. This is the first dry evening we've had for a while. It's actually Boxing Day and it's pretty cold down here by the river, but I've got a story to tell you. So thank you for tuning in, and I really hope you enjoy it. It's called Light in the Darkness. It was the blackest of days. Grey clouds obliterated a December dawn, and ships of fog sailed along the valley below the ramshackle farmhouse. Amy woke to silence. There was no Patrick to wake her with a cup of tea. He was due home on Christmas Eve. But Tiger was gone forever. Amy buried her face below the alpaca fleece duvet. She'd begged Patrick not to go, and then spent the rest of the day beating herself up for making his drive to Bath such a miserable one. She knew he had to go, but she hadn't wanted to make the decision about Tiger on her own. Amy sighed and bit her lip, holding back the tears, recalling her life with Tiger. He was her cat, named as a tiny kitten for the exquisite markings on his head, back and shoulders. He was the perfect cat and the truest companion, boldly facing the world with one good eye and a wonky front paw. Perspective had surprisingly never been a problem for him, catching birds and mice ever since he was allowed to roam in her tiny back garden in Essex. Now in Wales, he'd proudly deposited a host of assorted rodents on the back doormat. He'd loved a tickle and a cuddle, but retained an independent streak, often gone for a day and a night, returning home hungry and purring. But now he was gone. Amy's sobs heaved from her chest. She buried deeper under her duvet in search of comfort and warmth. Beneath the tiny plum tree, the one she'd planted for Grandad George, she dug a hole. Again and again her spade had hit stones in the rock-laden soil, but she bent to the earth, extracted the culprits, and threw them on the spoil heap before picking up the spade again. The sky was a diluted orange by the time the hole was big enough to hold the shrouded body. One last time she had peeled back the toweling and kissed the stripy head before laying Tiger to rest. Once safely interred beneath the earth, she'd placed back the stones, the beginnings of a cairn, over her best friend. Tiger had been there the first time Charlie hit her, and the last, when the police took him away, removing him from their lives forever. Tiger curled beside her belly every month when the gnawing pains confined her to bed. He'd taught the new kitten Barney, allowing him to be a permanent shadow, and he'd nestled around her shoulder, purring into her neck while she sobbed into her pillow the day her beloved Grandad George died. Life wasn't the same without Grandad, but without Tiger, half of her was missing. Wrapped in a blanket over her dressing gown, Amy shuffled downstairs into the bathroom, wincing at the cold seat touching her flesh. Washing her hands, she stopped, the meow from the other side of the door sending her into confusion, before grief flowed over her once more. In the hallway, Barney's black bullet head bumped at her shins, and he looked up at her with hungry, hopeful eyes. It took 2 hours to get the wood burner blazing and have a bath. With a mug of fruit tea with hibiscus and echinacea, unable to face breakfast, Amy sat looking at the 2 large cardboard boxes, an artificial Christmas tree in its red plastic pot. What was the point? Her mum and dad were in Spain with her sister Jess and her new baby Tara, and Patrick's parents lived in France, so no one was going to know if their home was Christmassy or not. She'd balanced 10 Christmas cards on the shelf above the fireplace, but their cheery greetings stung her eyes and burned her cheeks. Christmas songs on her iPod made her sob, as all she could hear was Grandad George crooning to the Hollywood numbers he'd adored. Amy slammed the kettle onto its cradle, grumpy and frustrated with her lack of ability to do anything. She flicked her cheek with the end of the long brown plait of hair that trailed over her shoulder, desperately searching for a purpose to her day. The kettle steamed. Flash. Bang. Amy stood in darkness. With her knapsack bouncing on her back, Amy shone her torch onto the damp grass, her walking boots slipping often on the steep bank down to the river. The clouds were gone, bringing the prospect of an evening chill to scald her nose and cheeks. Inside her fleece-lined coat, warm and breathless, she surveyed her riverbank. With little flat land around the cottage, Amy had tended a stretch of the bank like a garden, and in this bramble-free area, bird feeders and wind chimes sang sadly from the skeletal branches. From her pack, she filled the containers with nuts and seeds, and from the bare branches she hung her homemade fat balls. Without the light of the torch, the trees were silhouetted against the sky like ghostly long-limbed creatures striding across the landscape. The fading light wreathed the buxom river with a delicate mist. Amy breathed in the beauty of the fading light, settling her shoulders back with a sigh. Down on her beach, sitting on a cushion wrapped in a bin bag, Amy leaned her back against the riverbank, the enduring sound of the water gurgling gently below her feet. An owl called. From the rustling behind her, a twittering robin flew onto a branch, stretching over the river, tipping his head to one side to assess her. She switched off her torch and looked up, gasping at the bejewelled velvet sky above her. Every star glistened and glimmered to an ancient tune, and Amy, caught up in the music, strained to view every one until her neck ached. She knew it was the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, the longest night and the shortest day. Ahead lay the dark, cold days of January and February, but each day would be a little longer, or so the website said. Back in Essex, she'd hated those months, digging her car from the snow to visit her parents, or queuing on icy platforms in the vain hope of a train to take her to work. But the website had explained that nature wasn't cruel. Though the trees were bare and cold froze her fingers and toes, it wasn't the end. Beneath the earth, deep down, tiny seeds nestled, storing up energy. Trees, plants and shrubs, though leafless, were nurturing new shoots, buds and roots, ready to emerge in the coming spring. The robin bounced at her toes, the Titian flash on his chest in contrast to the darkness around them. She reached into her pack, fingers seeking stray food, and she scattered a handful beside her. Beneath the silvery beauty of the gibbous moon, the robin bobbed and flitted to and from his branch, and the river gleamed its way to the sea. Beneath the stars, the wheel of the year spun in perfect harmony. Warmth seeped into Amy's toes, her heart beating loudly in her ears. The enormity of the universe amazed and excited her, and though part of her felt like an insignificant speck on the world, the other part felt nurtured and comforted as a living, breathing resident of the whole. Looking up, she smiled for the first time in days, imagining the celestial light of the stars inside her own body, feeling herself part of the interconnected nature of all existence. She shut her eyes. Two figures stood before her, one crowned with holly leaves, the other vibrant green oak. There was no doubt they were men, but more than that, the figure crowned with holly was bound by darkness, inky black emptiness holding him enchained. Behind them a glow began, and grew brighter and whiter until within a circle of light stood a woman swathed in every palette of nature's green. Her timeless face flickered from youth to wisdom, yet all Amy felt was love as the Great Mother lifted her arms above her head before embracing the figure crowned in oak. Tiny flames flickered into existence, dancing on the branches and lighting up the forest, golden and wholesome like a field of swaying corn. No figures remained for Amy to see, but in the sky the moon grew larger. No longer gibbous, but a silver crescent, Amy reached for the moon. In the arms of a beautiful goddess, Amy let go her grief, and the goddess tended her wounds. Amy was sure she wasn't a witch, almost absolutely certain, yet the desire to move to Wales had been a powerful one. Maybe it was a reaction against the streams of endless cars clogging up the roads and queues of people at the tube station that led her to a life in the country. Patrick, dear, honest, hard-working Patrick, had said he was happy to live anywhere as long as it was with her, though clients for specialised window fittings would be harder to find in Wales. And she'd chosen wool for a career. Plenty of resources in Wales. Last night was a puzzle, though less of one since she'd learned about the Oak King taking over from the Holly King at this time of year, and then she'd read more, downloading books to her Kindle by hanging out of the bedroom window to get a signal. She'd read all day until 8 o'clock in the evening. Amy sat back into her armchair, pushing her oversized spectacles further up her nose, and she looked down into the brown, speckled knitting in her lap. This was the very last Christmas pudding tea cosy she was ever going to knit, and the holly and berries for the top were already done, though she'd enjoyed helping Fionn to organise a fundraising sale and coffee morning for a new school minibus. She hadn't just knitted tea cosies, experimenting instead with wools and yarns homespun by her or other local crafters, and creating mittens, wrist and leg warmers and hats of her own design. Fionn was great company in the wool shop while Patrick was away, and Amy happily volunteered to run the craft stall for the morning. With her great-grandma's wool needle, Amy grafted the edges of her tea cosy, expertly threading wool like fluffy ribbon to form the top, and finally, swiftly sewing on the holly leaves and berries. She smiled. Nothing witchy at all about Christmas pudding tea cosies. Amy awoke to a brand new morning dusted with glistening crystals. She groaned. Would Patrick be able to get home tomorrow if it started to snow again? Knowing he was coming home was the only thing keeping her going. Beside her stall at the coffee morning, Amy's face ached from smiling. In just 2 hours, she'd chatted to a dozen potential new customers and agreed to run a knitting circle and teach workshops. She'd also made a number of sales, so after donating 50% to the minibus fund, she should go shopping. That's why she was smiling, because she knew exactly what to buy. At 7:20 on the evening of Christmas Eve, Patrick's key rattled in the door, and Amy ran to meet him. While he stamped off his shoes in the porch, ignoring his cold, bristly cheeks, Amy kissed him and hugged him and led him into the living room. Holly, ivy and mistletoe sprouted between beams and lounged across every flat surface. Holly berries and fir cones nuzzled in the lush foliage, and the ceiling walls dazzled with fairy lights. Hundreds of fairy lights, white and crisp and new. Click. They clung together in the darkness, laughing as they bumped noses when they tried to kiss. Their eyes, with the aid of a few tea lights suspended in glass globes and the glow of the fire, they soon became accustomed to the darkness, and in fact, it didn't seem dark at all. "There's always light in the darkness," whispered Amy, And darkness isn't the end. It's just another beginning. Merry Christmas, Amy. Solstice blessings, Patrick. I hope you enjoyed this story. Do come back and visit again. You can find more about me and my stories and my dancing at wendysteele.com. And I hope you'll join us for another story on the riverbank soon. Good night. Are we done?
Well, sort of. What about it won't turn off?
Sorry, my fingers are so cold I've got to move them.
Why won't you turn off, you bastard?